Welcome, everybody, to the Collateral Damage Podcast. I'm Mike Wilson, and as always, my friend and co-host, Maureen Kavanaugh.
Hey, Mike, how you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. So my understanding is that we're going to start talking about families. I think today's topic is families and long-term care and some of the deficiencies in treatment and some of the things that, programs and people have put together that, have really just kind of, maybe even going back about 10 years ago when it first all started coming around, that families needed to be part of this, all the changes that we've seen since then. And I know you've had some experience yourself as a mom,
Yes.
watching your daughter go through this and seeing some of the deficiencies. Do you want to start with that? Do you want to tell me a little bit about your experience as a mom trying to fight through the system and getting access?
Yeah, before all this happened in my life, it never would have occurred to me that my child could go into a treatment center or into any kind of medical situation with paid for by insurance that we were paying for, and that no one would answer me when I called and wanted to know if she was okay. I mean, that sounds so counterintuitive. Here's somebody who is suffering and is sick enough to be in the hospital or in some kind of treatment facility. The treatment facility will take your money, but they don't want to even let you know if the person that you love is there or not.
Right.
So, that's how far out of the loop I was in the beginning when I started going through this with my daughter, that not only was I not involved in her treatment or her care, but I wasn't even told how she was doing. And if I called, I was told that they could not confirm or deny whether she was there. And I think that everybody has heard that.
Isn't that just insane, though?
Yeah, you want to reach through the phone and strangle the person, but it's not. They're only doing what they were told to do. The HIPAA, everybody's like terrified of HIPAA, so much so that I think we've really misread it, and it doesn't even make sense anymore.
It was originally put there to protect. So if I wanted to go to treatment, it's there to protect me. Whether I'm in a hospital, whether I'm getting services for substance abuse, whatever it is, it's there to protect. And I think it's become, if I can speak from my perspective as a person in recovery going into these programs, it was a tool for me. It was a tool for me to protect myself from my family getting involved in meddling with my treatment, or speaking to the staff and preventing
telling them the truth.
Yeah, telling them the truth. Yeah, talking about what's really going on at home, that maybe home is not an option, and I'm in there being like, no, yeah, my mother said I can come home, it should be fine, but it wasn't true. And it was just, if I was afraid if they talked to my family, that my family might actually influence my treatment experience or change my outcomes. And I really just wanted to go home. So, on the front end, it's like, yes, of course, who wouldn't want to be protected while, experiencing this extremely significant treatment experience? And who wouldn't want to be protected? But then at the same time, what about the people who are using it to defend and not actually get help, like I did to my mom?
Right, and then you're putting all of the responsibility on someone who is clearly not well, to do the right thing for themselves, and that's often not possible.
Yeah.
So that's, that I went through that with my daughter. I went basically through everything with my daughter, but I think she prepared me for this. She was like the master's degree in addiction was dealing with my daughter. And when when she first started using, and then when we realized that she needed to go to treatment, and I say we because in the very beginning it was kind of a we, she reached out to me and said, "Mom, I've been experimenting with drugs, and I'm scared. I scared myself, and I think I need to go talk to somebody." So I thought, well, first of all, this is the most wonderful child in the whole entire world who has now done something slightly less wonderful than I would have expected out of her. But she's coming to me and she needs help, and we are going to do this. We. And
we're going to do it together.
Oh, yeah. No, I was so totally on the ride with her. It was unbelievable. And so we went to the hospital and we went into the emergency room and we talked to people, and then she went to an outpatient program, and I thought that was going to be it. And so I had no conception of what was ahead of me at all.
Right.
And
you weren't part of that outpatient program, right? You weren't.
No, well, they wouldn't let me come in.
Oh, they wouldn't let you come in and sit down with her. That's
I would have, had they let me. I would have been sitting there right next to her, taking notes for her, so she wouldn't have to do it, But
Yeah.
But no, they drew the line at that. And
Yeah.
she does everything well. So she did that well too, and
Hmm.
she got out and started all over again and learned how to leave me out of it, because I was, it wasn't our experience and it wasn't our disease, it was her.
Right.
And I was on my own journey and trying desperately to be on her journey. And
Mm.
it took me years and years to figure out that in order for her to get well, I needed to separate from that, and in order for me to get well, I needed to separate from that.
Right.
But it was a long, hard road, and I learned a lot. And in that process, I learned so much that I couldn't use.
Hmm.
I mean, I couldn't use any of it on her because she had no interest in listening to me.
Right.
But I was able to find things out that helped other people, and I found that the most important thing was that I needed was the a connection to other people that were going through the same thing. And
Like
I went
as a
to
family member, not feeling so alone, not feeling
oh
like you're
my
the only one going through this, or that what
right
your daughter is experiencing is abnormal, right?
right.
Like this
And
is common.
Ex- exactly. And I wanted people to tell me what to do too.
Hmm.
Not that I would have listened to them, but I wanted to, and I did. And I asked everybody, what do I do? What do I do? But that's who I am. I'm like kind of a researcher. So if
Hmm.
there's a problem, I just research the hell out of it and then hopefully find some kind of an answer. But what I found is many, many answers. And I was able to like then begin to connect other people. And that's
Right.
how Magnolia New Beginnings came about. So these groups are on Facebook. About half of them are closed,
Hmm.
and that means that people have to ask to join. And once they join,
Mm.
we make sure that there's no marketers in there. There's nobody selling anything. There's nobody
Right.
asking anybody for money. And we have um, 21 administrators across the country that keep an eye on them. People
Okay.
go on there, and this is something that just happened the other day. Somebody went on in Kansas and wanted to know if anybody knew of a program that would take somebody dual diagnosis with no insurance in Kansas. And a bunch of moms answered her because they were in Kansas and they actually did know the answer to that. So, I mean, I think has been one of the most valuable things I've contributed to this whole mess, is that trying to connect people.
And it is a
And
mess. It's
it's a
such a mess. I
mess.
mean, that connection, right, that you were just talking about. I mean, being a person in recovery, I identify to that need for connection. I mean, as you were going through this abnormality, that this unfamiliar thing with your daughter, I mean, in the same sense, she was going through this as well, and I was
Absolutely.
going through this, and we needed that same connection. That's why we use, the fellowships of AA or NA or Smart Recovery, the support groups. Like that's why we go to these places, is so that we can make a connection with other people going through the same thing. If that
Right.
didn't exist, I mean, man, how
Right.
lonely and isolated would you feel? It'd be terrible.
And I was fortunate. I'm in Massachusetts. We have Learn to Cope, and
Yeah.
I went to Learn to Cope meetings, but I needed a Learn to Cope meeting at 2 o'clock in the morning, and
They don't have
and
those just
I
available?
know actually it's called Magnolia.
Yeah,
So
right.
at two, you go on at 2 o'clock in the morning onto any of our groups, and usually there's 50 other parents pulling their hair out of their head. So that was very valuable. And then we are a nonprofit and we raise money for sober living.
Hmm.
So that I was able to use some of the hell that I went through to develop that, and then continue on and go and create this practice of
It's a
helping.
system.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
yeah.
created
So
a
I mean,
system for people who just, are not getting what they need from the current system.
right. And I mean, it's the experience of having lived through this that I also use to help other families that are going through it. And I
Hmm.
sit down and try to help them pull themselves out of the roller coaster that they're riding.
Hmm.
I always love, my favorite thing you talk about is the birds. And I know you
Oh, the
may, so
murmuration. Yeah,
I
yeah,
always talk about this, and I
yeah.
try to say it, but I never say it as well as you do. So you have to. But I just think that that's so true, and it's such a visual that everybody can relate to.
Mm.
That you should really know. You should do it justice by telling it yourself. But that's what I want to do. I want to help people pull themselves out of that need to like just spin crazy way, just like the person that's out of control.
Well, I mean,
And
how easy is it to get caught up in somebody's stuff? I mean, let's say you're at your house and I just came over right now and I came in like Kramer from Seinfeld, just crashing through the door. I got all these problems, I got all this chaos, and immediately you're thrust into my madness. You don't have a choice. I've brought it into your home. You can feel the energy, you can feel the confusion. You care about me. You want to try to help me sort this out. Guess what? Now you're in it. Now you're in it with me. Now we're just spinning around together because I'm not looking for a solution. I'm not ready to do anything about it. I'm just experiencing this chaos, right?
Right.
And so, I mean, even if you don't understand I haven't had a chance to share the bird analogy, the murmuration stuff, but, same basic idea is that, you're getting caught up in that person's chaos and like the escape of the support group, being able to step into, a support group at 2 a.m. Online, or being able to just throw out some of your fears and concerns online. I mean, that's an amazing resource to step out of that chaos when it hits you. When I come crashing through your door like Kramer and you need a break and you can go in the other room and be like, what is happening right now?
Right. And, your friend or your husband or your sister can tell you, you have to calm down and take a breath. But when somebody who is not going through it in the same way that you've gone through it says that to you, your response is, you calm down and take a breath. Don't tell me what to do. You don't know what you. But when in the groups, when a mom says, you know what, I've been through the same thing. Step back for a second, think about this, think about that, and think about how the other times that this has happened and it's been okay. And there's really nothing you can do about it right now. I mean, that's different coming from a mom that had the same experience 6 months ago and can tell you what happened and what they did. It's just a totally different experience. So,
well, I mean, isn't that the same if you're going through anxiety and somebody tells you to relax, just don't have it, or you're depressed and like, well, just get up and don't be depressed, and you're like, what?
Yeah, put one foot in front of the other.
What are you talking about? Yeah, just go outside and get some fresh air. I'm like, you don't understand, and so having, like you said, having somebody who does understand, I mean, would just be really nice.
Yeah, it's been really kind of incredible. So this is kind of the way I made, lemonade out of lemons. It was just, it was like years and years of going through this horrible experience and learning all of this and getting to know some incredible people doing incredible things and not being able to really help my own daughter with it. So I tried to help other people. And now, I mean, I'm so excited about this because here are all these wonderful, exciting, interesting people that I've gotten to know over the years and connect with, and that many of them have some really good answers to the problems, and we're going to get to talk to them and share that with everybody.
Well, that's my favorite part about it. I want to learn. You know what I mean? And as somebody who can talk about this, I want our listeners to hear things that they wouldn't normally hear, from people they would never, ever get a chance to talk to or get a chance to ask these questions to. So if you and I, through this podcast, have the ability to bring on guest speakers, like some of the amazing ones that we have coming up. I mean, we've got a woman today that's going to be speaking about this very topic. The people that we're going to have on are people that the average person wouldn't have access to. To understand the services, to understand the, what's happening and what people are doing and how people can get involved. I mean, I'm super excited too.
Well, and the name of the podcast, Collateral Damage, is, I think that Diane is a perfect person to have on this first episode because she sees the collateral damage all the time. The collateral damage being the family. Right. I mean, in my mind, when I think of that, there's many, many aspects and many, effects of addiction on different populations and on on the economy, on society in general. But when I think of it, I think of the collateral damage of what addiction did to my family and my children and my relationships and my health. I mean, so I think that having someone who is trying to make that better is the perfect person to have on this first podcast.
Yeah, of course.
And I know you see this all the time in what you do as well, because you deal with families, and that's part of why I love your approach, because it's family focused, and part of the reason why I took training with you, because
Right.
I like you were saying, I want to learn. I want to
Yeah.
know as much as I can from people who I respect, and I like the way they do things. And I always tell people, go. Mike Wilson has this great meeting on a Thursday nights in Danvers, Massachusetts, and they should go sit with him and steal his stuff, because
Right.
I do.
Just sit in the room, absorb the information, take it to others. Yeah.
Yes,
Well,
and
I mean, to your
yeah,
point, like this is, I've experienced this from a couple different angles myself as well. You know, obviously over the last 10 years, it's professionally, but initially, this was my whole reason for getting into this was because of the collateral damage that was being caused. You know, being a person in recovery, coming back into my life and realizing, just in retrospect and in hindsight, looking back and seeing my family didn't have a you. My family didn't have a Magnolia New Beginnings. My family didn't have a Learn to Cope. My family didn't have a me. My family didn't have a voice. And, I know that it's become known over the last decade or more that families need to be involved. And I think people have found a way to get them involved. But even when I first started this, when I first started my company, we were it was a nonprofit. It was just me sitting in a hallway type office at the Cumming Center. No real structure or framework. I reached out to a couple companies and I was like, hey, those moms and dads that call you and they call and say, hey, my kid needs to go to treatment, and you say, all right, we'll put them on the phone, and they're like, well, they don't know I'm calling. Well, that's a phone call you normally won't finish, and you'll end up saying, we'll have them call when they're ready. Instead,
yeah,
I'm like, why don't you just tell them to call me instead? I was like, so I can try to help them figure out what to do with their situation, because they're not ready for you, and you're not ready for them. And they
right.
were like, okay, fine. And so they started forwarding them over. And, for the first year back in 2009, we had 170 plus families come through in the first 9 months.
Wow.
And of those 170 families, these were almost all coming from the same few programs, from the same few options. And they were coming through the door with exactly that. I need my loved one to get help and they're not ready. We don't know what to do. And basically the only thing they kept hearing was, when they're ready, have them call. And that's just not enough. I mean, it's not enough to sit around and wait for them to struggle so badly that they're ready.
Right, because there are things you can do in the meantime, and they may not be things that you can do directly that benefit your loved one. Or it doesn't seem like that, but you are doing things that benefit them in the long run by making your family stronger, by understanding the disease. There's so many things that can be done.
Right.
We don't have to wait until somebody has some magic light bulb to go off.
Or overdoses, crashes
Right.
a car, hurts another family member. That was what I kept running into, was that,
Right.
I was running into this scenario where families were calling. And I've actually sat down with a few and they were like, geez, I don't know if we're ready to do this yet. It might not be bad enough. And then I have to ask the question, that really difficult question, which is, how bad does it have to get? How bad would it have to get before you decided that it was time to take action? How bad would it have to get before, we stepped in and challenged them? And I mean, these are hard questions to ask a family, and I'm not trying to put them on the spot, but it was really, there's so much you can do. You can learn, you can educate. Like, what if it was not addiction? What if it was diabetes? You find out your kid has diabetes. Do you wait for them to have an incident before you learn about it? Do you wait for them to need to go to the emergency room before you educate yourself as a parent as to what your role in this situation, what you bring to the table, what you can help with? And, like you...
I think we're starting to learn that we can only control ourselves, and I think that that's the thing. Is if parents or anybody that's supporting somebody, you can support them, and it may not look what you think it looks like, but by educating yourself and changing your own behaviors, I know that that's what happened with me. I changed my own behaviors, and also, it was not a coincidence that all of a sudden she started to change the way she was doing things too,
Right.
and. We never know what's going to happen because this is a terrible disease, and it often takes an awful turn, and people are losing their children and the ones they love all the time. But in my particular case, when I started to change the way I behaved, she started to feel it and change the way she behaved, and that at no point did that include me not telling her I love her every day,
Mm-hmm.
or her knowing that I was there when she needed help,
Right.
but and when she was ready to take the help. So but it just changed the dynamic, and it made me less crazy. And that was very important because I was really, really, really crazy
Well,
at that
and
point.
changing in a loving way, right? I mean, how
Right.
it sounds great, right? Like to say it, well, just change in a loving way, right? But to actually do it
It was the
requires
hardest thing I
education.
ever did.
Well, it requires education, whether it's
Right.
peer-led education or professionally-led education. It requires that somebody steps in and challenges the way you're doing things and educates you on how to do it correctly or in a more healthy way. And again, to your point earlier, I'm glad we have the guest that we have today. Diana Clark is going to be joining us for this interview, and her experience. She's a family outreach specialist at Turnbridge now. She's got previous experience as an interventionist, doing a lot of family work. She wrote a book, I believe, Addiction Recovery: A Family's Journey, which is really all about her. Some of the stories that she's stories of experiences she's had working through this with families. And I know that she has helped create a lot of family support groups in the same way that you have. And so she's been really pushing through this, and I'm really interested to hear her take on this, because
Yeah.
this is the topic, is how do you get the family involved, and why aren't all programs finding a way to do this, right?
Right. And my hope is that, that people out there, maybe there's some program administrators that, or treatment professionals that will say, you know what, this is the beginnings of this would be an easy fix. Why don't we try some of this?
Yeah.
Why don't we have the family groups? Why don't we do things differently? I was very fortunate with my daughter, Katie, because we had excellent insurance, and we had excellent insurance before they started cutting people off.
Right.
Towards the end of her experiences in and out of treatment, which she was in and out of treatment over 40 times, they started to cut her off at the end. So
Wow.
I watched it change, but Turnbridge was definitely out of my price range. So but they opened a woman's program and needed a couple of people to start the program with, because you can't have a program without people.
Right.
And she was fortunate enough to go to Turnbridge, where she didn't last because she wasn't
Yeah.
wasn't in the frame of mind to last. She was kind of going against her will. But and I was still on that idea that I was going to find the perfect place to save her.
Yep.
And but I got to see what it's like when it's done right. And
that family element is something that could be
Yes.
replicated, right? I mean, that's what we're talking about here today.
Exactly.
And my
it
hopes
doesn't
are that
have to be Turnbridge. This can happen in other places.
it's got to start somewhere, though.
Yes.
And if you can create a model that's effective, and by that I mean adding that family element. That's what I'm hoping to hear about today. And,
Yes, the missing piece,
Yeah,
definitely,
exactly.
in so many places.
Yeah. Well, I'm super excited for this, and so today we're going to hear from Diana Clark, again, a family outreach specialist, author of Addiction Recovery: A Family's Journey, and please enjoy the interview. So today we have Diana Clark from Turnbridge, a long-term residential program for men and women ages 18 to 30, as well as an author who's going to be joining us to share her thoughts and feelings on the long-term programs and families, and really just giving us her perspective. And Maureen, I know this is families is a topic that you love as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly the way Turnbridge does things. I'm really excited to talk to you today, Diana.
All right, well, let's bring her on. Diana, how are you?
Great. It's great to be here.
Thank you for being on with us. I appreciate that.
You're
And
welcome.
so could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your role down there at Turnbridge?
Sure. I am the family outreach specialist, and what that means is that I am out there in the communities running parent support groups, developing curriculum for families. But my job is to beat the drum for family recovery. That's my job.
That's a
Yeah.
great job. That's a really
Yeah.
good job.
I know.
So, obviously I've had the benefit of going down to Turnbridge. I've known you for quite a while, and I know that, we're definitely aligned in our approach toward families and how important of a role they play, how significant having the family on board for the treatment process, understanding the illness and learning about how they play a role in their loved one's long-term recovery is just so critical, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we look at this as the family and we all focus on Joe Jr., who goes off to treatment,
Right.
if these other 4 people don't change and they come back into that family system, the odds of regression and relapse are astronomical.
Right.
So if these 4 people do a shift, then the family system can be whole.
Well, that's the sick tree theory, right? You pull the sick tree out of the sick forest and get it well, and you put it back. It's a sick tree again. There's no way to fight that. What family doesn't want their loved one to go to treatment, come back fixed, and everybody doesn't have to change? I mean, wouldn't that be great?
We all hate change. Yes.
Yeah.
I think there's a real conflict too, because you feel like we keep telling the parents it's not your fault. You didn't create it. You can't cure it. But yet they do have to change. There's that extra C in there, I think.
Or an R, which is we are responsible as family members for our part of an equation. We may not have caused that, but we're responsible now for being a member of a ally in recovery.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, if of course parenting plays a role, of course nature plays a role, of course nurture plays a role. So I mean, here you have a family system. The entire system has broken down. The individual struggling, and then the family system has to adapt. Maybe they don't bring things up. Maybe they start keeping secrets. Maybe they lock their doors. I met a family that told me they were living like hostages in their own home, and they had normalized this thing, and they felt like that if the individual would just go get help, that the trauma would go away. And
Absolutely.
Absolutely not. But this has been happening for years. Yeah.
I walked into one home to do an intervention, and the mom had a lock about that big on her purse.
Jeez.
And I looked at her, I said, what's to stop him from picking it up from the handle?
Just taking it with him.
And she said it was more the point than the safety.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many people in so much pain, and they're typically not able to go to a treatment center that offers a program like this.
That's right.
Could you just talk a little bit about what it's like to be at Turnbridge for a parent?
So what it's like to be at Turnbridge for a parent means that you are actively engaged in the process. Well, we have mandatory psychoeducation workshops. We also have a 3-day retreat and educational experience for parents. We have parent support groups all over New England now. We used to have just a few in the Connecticut area. Now we have Boston and New York and DC. We're expanding and doing community support groups for anybody who has a struggling loved one.
Well, those community support groups, I mean, that's just an amazing resource all in itself, is to be, to have them, they're facilitator led, correct?
They are facilitator led. And Lauren Springer, our director of family services, in addition to running some of these support groups, she is available as a resource to parents 24/7, and it is genuinely 24/7. She answers those calls anytime.
Wow.
She's amazing. Yeah, and that's a resource to parents.
Jeez.
So they're getting coaching, they're getting support, they're getting education, and the whole message is we are all in this together.
That's pretty amazing. I wish that could somehow trickle down to other treatment centers, and we could do this in other places as well. I was fortunate in that my daughter was able to experience that for a little while. And I found it interesting that you had somebody there that would answer a parent's phone call that wasn't bound by HIPAA.
Mm-hmm.
Could you talk a little bit about that? Because I don't understand why we don't have that everywhere. I don't understand it. And I'm sure parents don't understand it either.
So we are set up as 2 different agencies. We have a clinical agency and a residential agency, and the clinical agency is bound by HIPAA. If you were to call the director of clinical services, he could not talk to you.
Right.
But Lauren works with the residential piece, and we are not gathering information on the residential piece.
It's more educational, right?
It's not HIPAA bound.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was. I mean, that was so wonderful. The relief that I felt when I talked to her and I said, "Okay, I want somebody to tell me if she leaves. That's really was my biggest concern.
Mm-hmm.
Not even thinking that I could actually be involved in the treatment process. You know, that wasn't even on my radar because I was so used to being left out.
Yeah.
But just that part alone was pretty incredible.
I mean, I've been to long-term programs. So I mean, I know Turnbridge is a long-term program. You're talking about being able to, you know, keep them there long enough to actually have a lasting effect, you know, not just to deal with
and the family.
Well, exactly. Yeah. The whole system,
Right.
the whole system. I mean, if you have enough time to get beyond the, you know, the physiological connection to the substance and the immediate crisis that the family's going through, and then everything calms down, everybody's like, oh, it's fine now, we're good. Well, no, now let's deal with what actually happened and all the damage that was done, the collateral damage, if you will. You know, let's get to the meat of this. And you know, I mean, I've been to long-term program like the Salvation Army. You know, I think I was there for 7 months early on in my days, and you know, there was plenty of time between me and the last time I used, but there was no action. You know, there weren't people actively trying to get me to change my behavior. Nobody was speaking to my family. There was no liaison who looked at this as a family system issue. It was more punitive. How long can we keep you to make sure you're not doing what you were doing before?
Right.
You know,
Did it work?
What's that?
Did it work?
It did not work. That was crazy enough. That was not the solution. Yeah. And my family system stayed sick, and so did I, and I continued to use. And you know, there was good intention behind it. I think the people were really just trying to keep me away from what I was doing before, like a harm reduction kind of a mentality. And for that period in time, I did do less harm. I caused less harm to myself, but I also wasn't working on my illness, and my family wasn't involved, which means as soon as I graduated from the program, as soon as I completed the arbitrary timeline that they had placed in front of me, and then I went home, everything went back to the way it was because nothing had really changed. And I think that's what families fear the most is why is treatment... Yeah, it's not going to work because they're just going to come back and everything will go back to the way it was. And I agree if you don't do something.
That's right. If the system doesn't change, then nothing really changes. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, what happens is that when parents and other family members aren't willing to engage in the change process, that means that the person with the disorder has to become healthier than his family.
Right.
And that creates its own disconnect.
Boy, what are the odds that would happen? That the individual will go get well and come back so well that they can fix their whole family.
In 7 to 21 days.
Yeah. 3 weeks.
It's ridiculous. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
So now, what does a successful journey through Turnbridge look like? Like, what could a family or an individual expect if they were going to engage in this level of extended care? You know, what does it generally look like? Could you lay it out for us?
Sure. I will do it with a little humor. It looks like somebody with a serious substance use disorder and co-occurring mental health disorder, a young knucklehead coming in the door. Right? Mm-hmm. They're resistant, or they're saying, yeah, I want to do this, but I really want to do this by tomorrow. And so they come in, the family is really anxious. That is when Lauren Springer does an amazing job of holding hands and walking people through those first days of separation, where they're getting calls from their loved one who's saying, you know, food's bad, it might look nice, but they're really only here for your money. There's a whole host of conversation that goes on in those early days about why it's the wrong placement.
Yeah.
So, and then, you know, they're gradually integrated, the family and the young knucklehead, so to speak. And when they leave, they're not a young knucklehead anymore. They are a responsible, launched adult. They know how to budget money. They know how to, you know, wash dishes. They know how to cook. They know how to be kind. There is a whole humanizing, launching, and sort of culling the disease from the person and winding up with the human.
Man, getting the whole person well.
Getting the whole person, yeah.
Now, it's broken down into phases, if I'm not mistaken. So
That's correct.
You know, there's different stages during the treatment process, or the recovery process even, that require different levels of care, different levels of interaction, and responsibility and freedom as well, right? It's broken down into that.
That's right. Unlike the rest of the world where, or at least in some of their families, where they would expect to progress, where they would expect based on time and not based on their behavior. Turnbridge is teaching these kids that, yeah, when you engage in the program as it is written and engage in the steps that have clearly shown to us and others that you are on the road to wellness, we're going to give you a little bit more freedom. And as you have a little bit more freedom, then we're going to give you more trust. And then we're going to have more accountability and more expectations. So phase 1 looks a lot like primary treatment in that they're all together for the first chunk of their stay at Turnbridge. Phase 2 is all about, can they safely leave the program and, go to a meeting, get a ride from somebody else, go to get a job, go back to school, start the process to going back to school. And phase 3 is really where the rubber meets the road. And while they still have oversight and clinical care, they are really, really living adult lives and encountering adult pitfalls while they have the support and safety net around them.
I like that. I like that a lot. I mean, I was listening to Russell Brand the other day. He was a guest of Tony Robbins, had him on. I mean, Tony Robbins and Russell Brand, it was a great interview. And so Tony Robbins was interviewing Russell Brand on his book, Recovery, and how he breaks it down and how he uses different language, a little bit more fresh language to try to talk through the 12 steps and stuff. What's that?
Saltier?
Yeah, a little salty. Yeah, a little cheeky. And so he was asked to define recovery, which I thought was pretty interesting because, I think for a lot of people, they hear recovery, it's about recovering the life you had before you used. However, when you're dealing with 18 to 30-year-olds who've never launched into a life that they're trying to get back, his definition made a little more sense to me, which was you're recovering the life that you were supposed to have. Recovering access to the life that you were supposed to have. And I was like, that's the one. That's the definition that means something to me, because the life I had before I used was actually almost as bad as the life I had while I used. It was like, I don't want that back. I want something new. And so it was about recovering the life you were meant to have, the life that you could have.
And I've heard it said that the person I was will always have a substance use disorder. I needed to become somebody else in order to do those things.
And Maureen, in your experience, I know that you're watching people recover the life that they were supposed to have. I mean, you were just recently at a large event with how many thousands of people in the audience that were in recovery? Just showing
Recovery Fest, yeah. Absolutely, yeah. Recovery Fest down in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. We had Macklemore and Fits and the Tantrums, and I was part of putting that together. And at one point, Macklemore looked out into the audience and said, "How many people are in recovery?" And like 8,000 people put their hands up. It was amazing.
Yay!
But you're right. This is a totally different life than they had before. First of all, like you said, many people, they start using so young. They don't have any experience at all being sober in a circumstance like this. So you are starting all over again. Yeah. And to expect people to do that on their own. I mean, my feeling is, you need at least a year. And I know that that's what Turnbridge tries to do, because you let, even the most well-meaning person, somebody who's really dedicated to getting well, they come out and they hit all of these different obstacles. All the things that happen in a normal life over the course of a year, they now have to navigate these things. And often they're trying to do this without any assistance or any help.
That's right.
I mean, how many times do you see somebody come out of treatment, a week, a month, even a couple months, even putting a couple months of distance between you and what you've done, and then you come back. I mean, I came back a couple times at 25 years old. Come out at 25 years old, and I came out of treatment with 25-year-old problems. I had family members that had 25-year-old expectations of me. I had family members that expected me to be able to raise my child that I had at 25. So I came out with these 25-year-old problems that required 25-year-old solutions and 25-year-old responsibilities, except I brought my emotional capability of a 15-year-old to the table.
Right.
And my family was like, why can't you do this? And I'm like, because I don't know how. What do you mean?
Right. Right.
And did you even know that you didn't know how?
I didn't. I mean, to be
Yeah.
honest with you, like, does a kid know that they don't know how to walk? Like, they don't even know they're supposed to yet. They just crawl and scoot around. Like, they don't know that they need to walk until you try to make them do it. My family kept trying to put me in the position to be responsible, to be capable. We'd come up with awesome plans and write it up on paper, and I was like, yes, I'm going to do that. But I couldn't. And it was just, I mean, my own personal experience was full of just stop doing drugs and be normal repeatedly, over and over and over again.
Right. Right. I mean, you go to a program, you have to live sober, change all associated habits, change your friends, change your structure, change your way of coping in the world, deal with stress, struggle, and pain, clean up the mess. And the world is telling them they're supposed to be happy doing it.
Right. So, well, sobriety is painful. Sobriety actually sucks for somebody who's been using to find relief, and they found security with it. They found safety in it. And then it's like, okay, well, you shouldn't do that, and you should feel good not doing it. And I'm like, I think I disagree with you. I think maybe I disagree with you. And then a second life gets hard, right? All of a sudden it gets hard, and they're like, but you've got 3 months sober. And you're like, I know, but I'm just going to get high. And people don't understand.
That's what happens.
I need the relief.
That's it.
I don't know how to soothe and cope and get relief without substances yet.
I had this conversation with somebody last night who was struggling, and I said, you have to sit with it. What you're going through, you're going to have to sit with because it'll pass. But that's not his experience. His experience is that he treats it by getting high, and then it passes, but he's not party to the whole passing of it.
So really pass.
Right.
My therapist once told me when I was in my 20s, Diana, every feeling fully felt passes. It is only when we stuff them that they get sick.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, I absolutely agree with that, and I can't stress enough, exactly how, whenever I was getting sober, okay, whenever I was getting well, whenever I was in recovery, whatever phrase you want to put in there, one of the hardest parts was accepting that the world comes with a little bit of pain, and when we talk about the pursuit of relief, right? So the pursuit of relief is that it's not that I don't want to feel pain. I don't want to feel anything. I don't want to feel any pain. And I think there's a sense of, I don't know, liberation, freedom when you come to terms with the fact that life does come with a little pain, that life does come with a little discomfort, that you are going to feel a little depressed, you are going to feel a little anxious, and like you just said, a feeling fully felt, you'll get to the other side of it instead of my constant pursuit of, I can't feel this, I don't know how to feel this, I'm like confused and afraid, I've got to get rid of it. And that's what adolescent doesn't grow up and feel feelings that they want to get rid of because they don't understand it, or they're afraid of the feeling, like, is this forever? Am I always depressed now? Like, will I always feel this feeling?
And that's not just an adolescent. Any human who is in the throes of serious anxiety, fear, pain, grieving, it feels like it's overwhelming until it's passed.
It does, yeah.
Yeah, you really don't know what it feels like to be on the other side of it until you've gone through it a couple of times and gotten there.
Yeah.
Right. Well, Diana, so there's obviously you're doing things the way every parent wishes they could go to a turn bridge, right? They could take their children and drop them off. And I know that I did. When I dropped my daughter off, they told me, you can come and see the place where she's going to be while she's checking in. We like to keep you separated at the beginning. And I laughed and I said, you don't understand. Because he was trying to make me feel better. And I had been through so much with her that I said to him, I feel like I could run right through the wall to get to my car to get out of here because I just
do not slow it down as she gets out.
No, I just didn't want her to follow me. That's all. I wanted to leave her there, and I wanted so badly for her to get well there. And but it was really a wonderful opportunity for her. But most people don't get that opportunity.
I know.
Most people are 7 to 14 days tops. And, every once in a while they get a longer term program. And if my daughter, I keep referring to her, but it's what I know. she had maybe 40 different treatment centers she walked into. And that was the only one that somebody talked to me and told me about, that there was something there for me. Now the odds are that's not good.
Yeah.
So what would you suggest if you have all these places, a lot of them, like here in Massachusetts where I am, we have the Mass Health places. The budgets are very small. If they could make one change, we could make one change. I know involve the family, but if there maybe even a position that was available, or
I think that liaison position for somebody who is there to answer those calls for families in crisis. I think that would be the position I would add. And I would also encourage those parents that while the state of Massachusetts may not provide the support groups, there are many organizations in Massachusetts providing supportive services.
Yes.
So we're talking about adding that family element, like having, I mean, what would that actually be like to add a family advocate? Yeah. I wonder. I don't even know if that's that hard. That's not a big far reach to have a program add one well-educated family liaison position, right? I don't even believe that's that outrageous, to be honest with you.
Well, I hear you guys tell me that it happened then.
Yeah,
what's that?
It's right. Totally overlooked. I mean, even if a place does have any kind of family support at all, it's usually dedicated to that few families that seek it out. It's not like in Turnbridge's case where everybody is expected to attend
and participate. The whole family comes to treatment, and that's just the way it's got to be. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's an idea that we have to try to get to catch on in every facility.
Well, I do know, I mean, the reason we chose the name of this podcast, Collateral Damage, we're not just talking about how to get people well, how to get people into programs. We're not just highlighting where you can drop your kids off. I mean, the impact that this has across the board, the way that it affects family systems and the way those family systems impact our communities, I mean, it would be foolish not to.
I mean, they used to give this number that there were, for every one person struggling with a substance use disorder, there were 4 other people who were collateral damage. So that's basically 100 million people in our country alone. But that doesn't even take into account friends and employers and child care providers. Now they're talking about for every one, there are 10 people struggling with that person.
You keep adding that up, I mean, the first responder, just if you pay taxes, I think in the future, we're going to be having a conversation shortly, about the economic impact. I mean, if you forget about if you don't know anybody, that's over now. Like everybody's like, oh, everybody knows somebody. Even if you're the one that doesn't, do you pay taxes? Do you know what I mean? Do you pay for your community's first responders to have a job? Do you pay for the fire department, the emergency services, police department, whoever has to show up for an overdose? If you're alive and you pay taxes and you love people in any way whatsoever, you're definitely affected by this. It's impossible not to be. So, excellent. Anybody else have any other questions? I feel like I want this model to be. I want this to be the model. I want this. And I don't know what direction to take it in. I don't know how to challenge. The insurance industry. I don't know what advocacy group can stand up and scream from a mountain that long-term family-focused care is what's necessary to address this epidemic, but I'm grateful that there is an opportunity, and I'm grateful that you guys focus on the family element so much. And again, I'm just very grateful for having you on our podcast today to talk about it. And I hope
I'll
that
be giving it some thought. I mean, there are academies that train peer recovery coaches. Maybe they have a separate segment for family advocacy. Possible.
Yeah, I mean, that would be nice.
You can start it, the two of you. I'll come speak.
No, it's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
I think that people have to understand HIPAA better too, because I don't think I understood it as well as I did after Lauren explained. I mean, that she was able to talk to me because she wasn't bound by HIPAA. And I think that we've taken it to such an extreme that I know I had to find out when my daughter was in treatment or in the hospital by when I got the bills. That they didn't mind sending me.
That is true. That is true. That's, I mean, they have absolutely no problem reaching out to get reimbursement, but it's that, that conversation. And I think this was, you know, I may have made this comment previously, but you know, there was some discussion recently about the percentage of people that are in treatment and where they are in the stages of change. You know, that there's a larger percent of the population, possibly 80-20. 80% of the people that are in treatment are still wrapped up in the pre-contemplative, contemplative stages of change, which is, you know, a really tough place to be stuck. And, you know, them being stuck in that place, it's like, you know, I think the treatment model and protecting the individual and their anonymity and stuff like that is really focused on the 20% that are there for themselves, that are self-motivated, that are driving themselves through treatment because they want to change. But it's that other 80%, the larger population, that needs so much more wraparound services. They need their family involved. They need family impact. I think they're missing out because of the way the system is built. Not that people don't deserve that privacy, not that a self-motivated individual shouldn't have that, but that for that 80% of the population that's still struggling, they need something else.
Right. And I think that 20% who is engaged would be more than happy to have their families engaged with them.
That's right, because the other 80% don't want them engaged, so they don't meddle. I don't want my family to stop me from going home.
Drinking the Kool-Aid and understanding the ways I manipulate. Yeah.
I don't want them to change. I don't want them to stand in the way of me going home.
That's right.
That's what I used to say. I used to say that all the time.
Sure.
Get the case manager on the phone with my mother. I'm like, they told me they don't even know why I'm here. They don't even. They just told me I should go home and that you're crazy. And my mother's like, what?
These groups, right?
What's that?
I could teach.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah. I don't even know. You guys, this is. I could teach this. I could run this group. I could run this program.
Right.
Oh yeah.
That's right.
We've all heard that. I think every parent's heard that.
Absolutely.
Well, that's the call.
Yeah.
I mean, and you know, Maureen, to your point, that's the call that I think the parents are so frustrated with, is that they get the call from their child or loved one. They get the call from, you know, a case manager or something talking about what their loved one has agreed to as a discharge plan, not necessarily what they need. You know, you've got this individual who's like, well, they've agreed to come home and do outpatient. What do you think about that? And the mom's like, well, I mean, I guess, is that what you recommend? And well, that he's willing to, you know, and so it becomes this, what should I agree to? What should I believe? What should the best next steps be? And
right.
And the family hasn't worked on themselves or got.
Yes.
Exactly. Yep. So they're just like, they don't know what to do, and they're thinking that, I guess this is what happens, and they haven't had the you know, the ability to learn as a family unit.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, I've been told if you want to solve a problem, just try to explain what the problem is, and the solution will present itself. And I'm convinced that this conversation has done exactly that for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, as we start to highlight the deficiencies and as we explain the problem matter-of-factly and thoroughly, the solution becomes obvious. Adding a family element to any program, insurance-based or otherwise, there should be a family liaison, an advocate, an educated peer, somebody that can reach out to the family and provide a compartmentalized educational portion to the treatment program, even if they can't provide direct access to the counseling or therapeutic services the program has to offer. Right?
That's exactly.
So there it is. We just solved the problem on our first podcast.
For family recovery yet again.
We're going to take this as a W for today. This is fantastic.
Perfect.
Excellent. All right.
Well, thank you so much, Diana, for being on the show today. We really appreciate it.
And I hope that you'll be a guest again someday, and we can revisit this topic of long-term extended care, family support. So once again, thank you so much for joining us, Diana.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well.
All right.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Wow. What a great interview. Diana she really hits the nail on the head when she's talking about the families and how important it is to just have that liaison, right?
Yes.
You know, that one person that's not bound by HIPAA that can just talk to you and educate you. You know,
why
that
is this so
missing piece.
difficult?
It's
so obvious. I don't understand why there aren't more places doing it.
One paid position. That's it. We're talking about one paid position at each program, whose sole responsibility is to make contact with the family that otherwise wouldn't hear anything. Right. But again, you know, I mean, that's assuming that there's even a little bit of a release, right? Just because, Yeah, I get it. I understand that, by according to HIPAA, they're not allowed to confirm whether they're there or not.
Yeah.
But it would be great if that one person, like if the liaison could get just the basic permission of, hey, we're not going to talk about your treatment experience, but can we just talk to your family and try to help educate them? And maybe they'd get a yes. Maybe
right.
if they stepped in and explained themselves, they'd get a yes instead of just assuming it's a no.
Right. Exactly.
Oh.
I mean, she's just, that's something that is so important and so needs to happen, because all the suffering that the family goes through too. I mean, their programs and their groups. I'm so happy that their groups are open to the public.
Yeah, what'd she say? They're in Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York, Virginia, led by 3 different people: Diana Clark, Lauren Springer, Justin Cambria. I mean, there's the idea that
Lauren Springer is amazing too.
Yeah.
So I mean, I know her as well, and I don't know Justin, but these are like people that have been doing this for a really long time, and you're getting the benefit of all of their experience, and keep in mind that this is one of the few places that's doing anything like this, right?
Yeah.
So can you imagine what those groups are like?
I know. Well, there's another program up in New Hampshire that I know has created a recovery set, like the Pritz Recovery Center. It's very community based, and I'd love to have them on here as well at some point to talk about
Absolutely.
that. But that's what it is. It's these little pockets of people, setting up camp and trying something new. Stepping outside of the boundaries of what insurance says they're supposed to provide. Not the minimum, but the most. You know what I mean? Not just the basics to get by, but what can we actually add in to help? And like I said, as Diana was explaining it, I mean, how better to do it than to provide a baseline education separate from the therapeutic services, just to give a family like some common sense understanding of what it's going to be like to provide to support long-term recovery.
And this is the thing. So with this podcast, I'm hoping that it's not just a bunch of complaining. I mean, we know what the problem is, and there are people, no matter what the problem is, they have, if not the answer, a part of the answer. And we have to take this as because every parent can be an advocate.
Of course.
Every loved one can be an advocate, and go to the treatment centers, go to the BSAS and the places that regulate all the BSAS in Massachusetts is the place that regulates the treatment centers, whatever it is in your area, and say, how come we don't have this?
Right.
Because this will change things. It'll create a different dynamic with the family, and this is a model for what works.
Well, if these conversations do anything, like let's just say they spark a desire from a family to be like, well, why don't we have that? Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Maybe they don't even know what to ask for. Why?
Exactly.
If this podcast sparks that conversation, it's like, well, why don't I have access to that? And then they call the program and say, hey, program, why don't I have access to this? And then the program asks the director, and like, hey, how come this family doesn't have access to that? If that's the path to get there, and it can start with these conversations, like I said earlier, if we can bring guests on and just talk to them about, the questions that no family would ever have the opportunity to ask unless they're traveling around, visiting all the programs and talking to these people, maybe, just maybe, on the other side of this, something will change.
Right, and I'd love for people to visit our Facebook page.
Absolutely.
And or send us an email, and it's cdpodcast.com.
cdpodcast.com. That will get them everything they need to know about how to find us on Facebook, on Twitter, how to follow our podcast, subscribe to our podcast, find our YouTube channel. I mean, in all honesty, we're going to make this available in so many ways that if they can't find it, they might be doing something wrong.
So, and I really want people to tell us what they want to see too.
Yeah.
Because we hopefully will have access to people that will have an answer, or they may have new information. So if there's anybody out there that has a question, that wants that has like that thinks that they know somebody they'd like to hear, I invite everybody to get on there, get on the Facebook page, send us an email, and let us know. Absolutely.
Questions, topics, guest speakers. That we have a contact form right on the website. Again, cdpodcast.com, right on the website. If you send that contact form in with your questions, we'll get them. If you want to be a guest, you hop on there and you send us your information, and we'll review it and we'll get you in the lineup. I know right now we're looking ahead at, we've got Diana was great. We've got who's next? We've got Andrew Berkey. I think is our next speaker, and this is gonna end up being a big one, so it'll probably be a two-parter.
The smartest person I think I've ever met in my whole life. His brain. I always tell him I want to get inside your head because it's amazing the way he thinks.
Well, he's definitely got a good topic. I think we're going to be talking about the economic impact that substance use has had on globally, economically through our country, and so that's going to be an interesting one. Yeah. I know we've got a special guest that we'll talk about coming up soon. And we've got some topics that people probably don't even think about on a regular basis, and these are the guest speakers that we're going to be introducing the collateral damage in a way that maybe most people aren't familiar with.
Right.
And that's just amazing. So I'm super excited for this. And
I hear you're excited about Saturday night too.
I am excited about Saturday. So we have a fundraiser coming up, which is a scholarship fundraiser for our Men's Sober Living, Barry's House. So Bay State Recovery Services is hosting an event. All the details of that event can be found on our website, baystaterecovery.com. Tickets are available. Tables are available. There'll be a live auction, a silent auction. You'll be joining us, right?
I will be there.
It's going to be a good time. And so everybody's welcome. Public is welcome. There'll be tickets available at the door. Everything starts at 6. The dinner starts at 7:15. So there's plenty of time to get there and find seats and stuff. But this is fun. I mean, we do this every year. We raise a good chunk of money, and we put it directly toward our guests. Last year we raised about $20,000, which put a lot of people through the house. Partial scholarships, full scholarships, getting people in for the first couple months when they have no money, coming out of treatment with nothing, no family support, getting them on their feet until they can get a job and cover some of their own expenses is a really, really big deal for us. So
yeah, well, I've actually just saw the house this week, and I was really impressed.
That's right. Yeah, and I mean, to the conversation today with Diana, just talking about that long-term extended care. Not everybody has either their insurance or the finances to have that long-term option made available to them. So they have to piece it together. And, that's where we've been able to plug Barry's House in and other sober livings. There's good quality sober livings around, but plugging them in as that really good aftercare option to get somebody beyond the, beyond that hurdle of where do I go now that I'm sober. Right, feeling a little bit better about myself. Now, where do I go? So,
well, that's why Magnolia raises money for sober living, because that is the missing piece when there isn't long-term care available to you.
Right.
If the most you can get is 30 days, you're not ready to go back out into the world. So, I love what you're doing there.
Well, thank you. I'm glad. And thank you for reminding me to bring that up. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
So it looks like, our next podcast is going to be with Andrew Berkey.
I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, he's the founder of Life of Purpose, and I believe he's on the board for Young People in Recovery, YPR, which is...
He's on the board of Recovery High School, too, which is near and dear to my heart because I work in a recovery high school.
That's right. He's actually done a little work to try to help clean up Florida sober homes. He's on their task force. I mean, it sounds like he's going to be a really interesting guest with a lot of perspective, considering he's attached globally to this and has insight from so many different angles.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that'll probably end up being a two-part. We have a lot to talk about with economics, so I can't wait to hear how that one plays out. All right, I'd like to thank all of our listeners for joining us today on this episode of Collateral Damage. As always, if you'd like to find out all the different ways that you can listen to our podcast, you can visit our website, which is www.cdpodcast.com. There are many different ways to listen and subscribe, and we encourage you to choose the one that's most appropriate for you. And as always, I would encourage our listeners to get informed.
Stay connected.
Thank you for joining us.